Hello everyone, I'm John Euler. This is Journey to Healing, and we're going to look at what are some of the things that cause us to respond or react in ways that we're not proud of. And before you know it, we find ourselves reacting and then we're guilty, or we feel guilty, and then it happens again. How do you explain that? We will look at that next on Journey to Healing.
Welcome to Journey to Healing. Do you find yourself discouraged, troubled, in need of healing, but not sure where to turn? John Euler, a licensed professional counselor, is here to help. John has more than 25 years of professional experience helping people deal with the issues that keep them emotionally and spiritually stuck. There is help. There is hope. There is a God who loves you and wants to help you find peace and strength. And John Euler is here to help you find that on this edition of Journey to Healing.
Hello everyone, my name is John Euler. This is Journey to Healing. We're in an extended series on grief and loss, diving deep into the subject of boundaries right now. Why boundaries? Because without boundaries, you can't have limits, and without limits, things will never calm down in the current day, so you can begin to look at what needs to be looked at in the past if you have something. So we've been doing an extended look at who are the people that you need to have boundaries with, what are boundaries, how can you be sure that it is appropriate to set boundaries, and what happens if you don't. If you would like to look at or view any previous podcasts, there's an ever-growing repository of podcasts that can be found on SurvivorSupport.net under podcasts. I recommend that because that'll kind of set the stage or give you context for what we are talking about now. We have been building toward setting boundaries. We've been building towards recognizing the need and actually becoming sure that we can have boundaries, because that in therapy is one of the primary issues that underlies almost all of counseling and the counseling the issues that people wrestle with in counseling. There's very common things that people will seek out counseling for: depression, anxiety, compulsive disorders, emotional eating, a general sense of discouragement, not really knowing what's going on for them. They just have what's called generalized anxiety disorder. They can have low-level lying depression, and they're not quite sure what it is. And the good news is, unless it's an organic issue, and thankfully we do live in a day and age where there is medication, but the good news is this: unless there is an organic issue going on, meaning something with the brain, there's always a reason why you are feeling the way you're feeling. Well, that's good news. That means you just don't have to relegate yourself to managing symptoms the rest of your life. Most people are told that, for instance, if they have a depressive disorder or if they have an anxiety disorder, here's a classic one. Many people are told if they have panic disorder, and again, that's where people have panic attacks, that the best they can do is manage that. Well, that is not true. As a matter of fact, probably within about 6 sessions, if you have a competent therapist, they should be able to help you significantly decrease your panic attacks within about a month or so of individual counseling. Oftentimes, and what I recommend is kind of doubling up on sessions early on. You kind of hit it hard, so to speak. Sometimes to set aside a block of 2 hours, that can be recommended, because sometimes an hour goes quickly, especially in the first couple of sessions. So I recommend maybe a 2-hour block of time, a couple times a week. You hit it hard, and then a lot of insight is going to start to come up, and you'll be in a much better position to begin to figure out what is eating at you or what is trying to come up. Now, most people are unaware of, as I'm looking for the clip, most people are unaware of what emotions are. And if you are unaware of what emotions are, you are not going to be able to establish boundaries. Why? Because you have to have your emotions. Not that emotions should drive setting the boundaries as far as in the moment as you're setting those, because if you are emotional, you're done. But if you work through the process properly, you won't be emotional when the boundaries are being set. So if you watch most people trying to set a boundary, they haven't worked through the process behind the scenes or ahead of time, so that when they get together with that person that they're having to set boundaries or limits with, without knowing it, because they're doing it too soon and out of their hurt rather than out of their healing, they will crumble. They will end up becoming emotionally reactive. Then they look like the problem. And then you've given that selfish person, the person that you're trying to set boundaries with, because the reason you're having to set boundaries is because they are selfish and they have not stopped. As a matter of fact, I recommend the podcast, How Big of a Pig? That's going to help you be able to be really sure about the need for boundaries, the extent to which you should implement boundaries, because they are not a black or white issue. They should match. There should be goodness of fit, and they are predicated upon two principles, which is grace and truth. You apply grace to those that are not selfish. You apply truth to those that are. And there can be an inverse relationship, as it were. So at first we want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but if it starts to become clear, how's it going to become clear? Through our speaking the truth in love. Love does not mean nice, by the way. We have a couple of podcasts on what are the mistaken notions or myths that will keep somebody stuck. I recommend that for context. So most people, though, are unaware that under the surface are our emotions. And emotions are extremely important not to act upon in knee-jerk fashion, but to give us information. It may be as simple as low blood sugar or a lack of sleep, and therefore I don't need to worry about it. I just need to get a good night's sleep or have something to eat. But they also could be containing truth. And so emotions are important, and they're important to investigate. If there is stuff under the surface, it may not take long before it comes bubbling to the surface. And when it does, the majority of psychology will tend to apply kind of behavioral types of techniques or cognitive behavioral methods. There's, on the one hand, there's nothing wrong with cognitive behavioral methods of dealing with internal emotions, because it helps us begin to try to identify what are the beliefs that have formed the thoughts that sometimes generate the feelings. But it also may be that there are feelings under our belief system. Maybe stuff happened early on that we've forgotten about. Now, can that even be possible? Of course it is. It sets the stage for a certain kind of feeling that may even counteract our beliefs, such as maybe we believe we should be nice, and that's a foundational belief. But if we have things going on under the surface, we're going to find that our niceness is, and plus we're not supposed to be nice, we're supposed to be reasonable, we're supposed to be effective. But if we have a belief that tells us that we are always to ensure that people are feeling okay, when things are not okay, then they will drive me to become what's called codependent or rescuing. So I want to show you a clip here, because this is a good example of a situation that can be under the surface. There are symptoms going on, but people may not be aware of. In the film clip you'll see, because this has to do with a recent fire that was in the Gulf of Mexico. An oil rig, the underground pipe burst. It caught on fire. I'm not sure how that works. But anyway, so it is self-evident that there's something going on But look at the approach that they're taking to try to deal with this. And I'm not much of a analyst when it comes to fighting underwater fires, so I'm not going to critique these people. But watch as you see the aerial view, you're going to see the derrick, and then you're going to see off to the side, you're going to see fire going on. This is a night view from the helicopter. So there's something going on. You notice it's sort of set off, so it's not directly related, as it were. You would think that oil derrick is on fire. And so we're now going to apply behavioral methods. We're going to try to tell the person to calm down. We're going to tell them to meditate. And before you know it, because they're not setting boundaries, what happens? Something significant happens. Why? Because there wasn't an appropriate fit in what was going on under the surface. So again, you can have something going on under the surface that's very real, but if you take a behavioral approach, if you try an intervention such as calming down, taking a time out, now all those are important. I'm not minimizing any of those. But if that tends to be the approach, for instance, many times, for those that are suffering from panic disorder, from panic attacks, they will be told they need to meditate. Now, I'm not minimizing the need for meditation. As a matter of fact, there's a difference between Eastern meditation and what I might call Western meditation or Judeo-Christian meditation. Eastern meditation tells you to empty your mind. I'll give you a hint. You can't do it. We're never intended to empty our mind. Our minds are always going. Now, we need to become still. As a matter of fact, Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I'm God." If I don't become still, I'll never be able to hear God's still small voice. So becoming still is very different than Eastern meditation. And there's some dangers when you try to empty your mind, because from a Christian perspective, you could be inviting some things. So that's for another topic. From a Judeo-Christian perspective, you actually fill your mind. You take every thought into captivity. So your thoughts and other things, your emotions are running like cats all over the place. So you're trying to herd cats. And to try to bring them under captivity. So you're going to corral those thoughts, because if you allow them to run away with you, bad things are going to happen. So you do have to become still, but you need truth. That's what you're going to begin to meditate upon. And one of the truths that I think we need is that God wants to be involved. God can help give us insight. In Proverbs chapter 1 and chapter 2, written 3,000 years ago, says that if we cry out for wisdom, we will know what is right, just, and fair. What does that have to do with anything? You would think we would be praying for strength, for patience. And there are times to pray for that, but isn't it interesting? It says we will know what is right, just, and fair. I'll tell you what that has to do with. It has to do with boundaries. It has to do with how we are treating other people. And if I'm dealing with somebody that I shouldn't be dealing with, there's going to be consequences. So I need discernment, because selfish people, the more they morph into a selfish person, the more difficult it is to be able to really figure it out just intellectually in my left brain. So my right brain will tell me what's going on. Now, what happens if I ignore that? As a matter of fact, I'm going to play the clip again because that was so good. So again, let's say I have stuff under the surface. This is what I would call compulsivity or reactivity, emotional reactivity. So we have an issue that is apparent, maybe not completely apparent, but there's some stuff going on. And so I try to manage it, right? I'm just trying to calm down, but that doesn't work all that well. So something will trigger it, and then I look crazy. And people say, what the heck happened to you? I don't understand it. And so we've looked in the past, we've looked at some film clips that show, like Carol Burnett on the old Carol Burnett show, and Mama Carol Burnett gets so fed up as they're playing sorry, she goes and starts doing property damage. She's ripping pillows. Some of you have lived with people like that. Now the question is this: when that explosion takes place, Is it the result of emotional reactivity, or is it the result of selfishness? We think in terms of reactivity, there's a lot of energy and a lot of power, but the question is what's under the surface? For those that have been trying not to make waves, as a matter of fact, talk about making waves, as that big explosion came up. But there are some people, instead of exploding, what will they do? They will implode in on themselves. They will hurt themselves in some fashion. As a matter of fact, compulsive eating out of emotion is what? Is me taking those emotions, and most people are not aware of it, and the energy that is being used to do what I'm doing is being used to siphon off emotions. Now, there are 1,000,001 ways that we can channel off this kind of energy. And where's the energy coming from? Emotions that are suppressed. Remember, they're kind of bubbling under the surface. And if they get triggered, then the person will have to do something. Why? Because that explosion's coming up. So they're going to have to do something to push that down. The Richter scale-like effect that they start to feel, we call that anxiety. It is actually adrenaline. So there's force that's coming up. A part of us has been triggered. A part of us feels backed into a corner, or we're losing control. We go into the fight-flight syndrome, and what happens? Our adrenal glands kick in. Now we've got all this surge of energy, but an anxious person, if you ask them to take a checklist or do a checklist, you can go online, download a checklist for anxiety, look at that, and I challenge you with this. Look at that list and then drink 5 really tall Starbucks coffees, and in about 15 minutes or a half hour, look at the list and ask yourself if you don't match all that criteria. So is it that you're anxious, or you're filled with adrenaline? And you are filled with adrenaline. So adrenaline is the reason for anxiety. Where is that adrenaline coming from? It's coming from a part of me being put into the fight-flight syndrome, backed into a corner, or I'm losing control. If I have enough anger over a long period of time and I have all that energy coming up, a part of me is having to push that back down. That's a lot of energy. Think about that explosion. If I'm pushing that back down, I need at least that same amount of force plus 1 pound per square inch to push it back down. Have you ever seen anybody that's depressed? Sure. Where is their energy? It's going to keep a lid on things. So, underneath all the vast majority of the psychiatric issues, again, just shy of a physical or organic thing, you have emotions under the surface that most people have become split off or separate from. If they don't begin to realize that as they become their own emotional detective, that somewhere in the recent past, or maybe distant past, boundaries were askew because truth had not been able to come up. Well, maybe we don't have big explosions going on. Maybe we just have, over time, some other kind of things that maybe aren't noticeable to anybody. How about eating disorders? That can be one of them. How about workaholism? How about avoidance of certain things? Those are a little more passive, but still very powerful. What happens if I ignore what needs to be attended to? What happens if I ignore some of these emotions and therefore am unable to set boundaries? I will continue to live with that kind of dynamic, usually in a family. I'll continue to live with that. Yet, whenever I get back together with that person or people, a lot of which has to do with our what's called family of origin, our family, we may be doing fine everywhere else, but once we step back through the threshold, or once the phone rings and it's my parent or it's that other person that's connected to my family, what happens to me? I start to morph. It's almost like I'm an adult everywhere else, but when I get back home, what happens? I almost start to revert. There's things in play, including, some of you experience this, nicknames, right? You're known as the boss everywhere else. You're known as Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so everywhere else, but you walk through that door and now you're little Johnny or you're little Jim or you're that person, or out will come the nicknames. What happens when that happens? Even though you have prepared yourself and you know it's a relationship that's fairly toxic, actually, when you have to do this, right? You're having to kind of psych yourself up and prepare yourself, whether it's Mother's Day, whether it's Father's Day, whether it is a birthday, whether it's the holidays, Thanksgiving or Christmas. Having worked in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections for 11 plus years on psychology staff, it shouldn't have surprised me, but I guess I was surprised by the number of guys that were in there. I worked in a male prison, that were in there because of an aggressive, if not violent, altercation over the holidays. Well, I thought the holidays were supposed to be a time for friends and family to get together and spread the love, and before you know it, adult son is beating the daylights out of dad, or vice versa, and then one of them may even seriously injure. So now we have assault going on, we can have property damage, or a weapon can be produced, because if they hit somebody with the empty alcohol bottle, and what happens there? Inevitably, you have alcohol going on. So if I find myself changing when I get back around those people, if I find I'm having to psych myself up, then it's probably an indication that it's not a healthy relationship. Truth has not been allowed to surface. It has been suppressed. A part of me knows the truth, and that's where my emotions are coming in. My emotions are sort of, I'm going to knock, ready? Or sort of trying to get, oh gosh, the dog, there you go. The dog thinks that somebody's at the door. I brought that on myself. But isn't that true though? Right? All of a sudden, a part of me starts to go into emergency mode. I start to become hyper vigilant. I start to have to deep breathe to keep myself calm. So I get back home, and what happens? And it doesn't just have to be at home, but oftentimes that can be indicative. How long can that go on? It could go on as long as you allow it. Meaning what? Well, if you have a relationship that has been left unattended, then the only thing that's happened is you've left home, but the question is, has home left you? Well, you'll find out the next time you get together with that person. There's a really good example of a father and daughter, for instance, that didn't resolve things very well. Actually, the father didn't intend to. The daughter was sort of trying, but there's still sort of the elephant in the middle of the room. That father-daughter was Henry Fonda and Jane Fonda. This is not a program, at least my program is not a program dealing with politics, so I don't have to touch that. I'm just looking at the dynamics. And there was a movie they played in together. Actually, it was his last film, and she directed it. So you have two very talented people, and what was ironic is they both played the same roles. In a way, they played father and daughter. So Jane Fonda was interviewed after having shot this movie, and I believe by the time Henry Fonda had passed away. And so she's reflecting back on what it was like to not only direct the film, but to play the daughter of the father. And as you listen, it's about a 3-minute clip, watch the emotions that come up all those years later. And the question is, why does she still have those emotions? And I would submit to you, it's because she didn't properly resolve things. It doesn't make her good, bad, or indifferent. What it means is this: the fact that she still feels the way she feels, as she's going to describe it, shows you there were some things that were left unfinished.
So there were these two things going on during the course of that film. There was the fact that I was working with my father, who was going to die soon. You know, I'd mentioned earlier, my dad just made tremendous fun of me that I studied with Lee Strasberg, okay? So we're shooting a scene in the movie where Dad and Kate are playing Parcheesi, and I'm sitting on the couch reading. And at some point, Kate says, "Why don't you come and play with us?" And my father says something hostile.
Chelsea doesn't like playing games. We don't know why. Probably doesn't like losing.
And I say to him, something hostile. I tend to panic when the competition gets too intense.
What's that supposed to mean?
Nothing. So we shoot my close-up first. And when we get everything lit and we're ready to go, and I realize there's so many lights I can't see his eyes. So I ask the cinematographer to put light on his eyes so I can see him, okay? We shoot the scene. Reverse. Now it's on his close-up. And just before we shoot, I say, is it okay, Dad? Can you see my eyes? And he says, I don't have to see your eyes. I'm not that kind of actor. And I remember being conscious of this thing happening where one half of me died, was obliterated. My father could still do that to me, just wiped me out. And the other half of me was, yes, this is exactly what Chelsea should be feeling at this moment. What I'd like to know is why you enjoy playing games.
Huh?
You seem to like beating people. I wonder why. It was the end of the day, and Dad left. I was sitting on the couch. I just felt awful. And suddenly I felt these arms going around me. It was Kate. And she sat down next to me and she said, don't let him get to you. She says, I know just how you feel. She said, Spencer used to do that to me all the time. You know, it would be his close-up in a love scene. I don't need you. You can go home. They have no idea, she'd say. They don't know how much those words can hurt you. Don't let it hurt you. And the fact that she had witnessed my pain and was acknowledging it meant the world to me.
What's the matter, darling?
Nothing. I don't think I've ever grown up on Golden Pond. Do you understand?
No, I don't think I understand.
Doesn't matter. I act like a big person everywhere else. I'm in charge of Los Angeles, and I come here, I feel like a little fat girl.
That's just because your father said that.
Some of you can relate, and that's not relegated to just gender. In the past, in some of the past podcasts, we've looked at a number of film clips that have shown both genders. Family dynamics, if left unattended, can create all that emotion sitting under the surface. And when you have, let's go back to that film clip, when you have this level of stuff under the surface, and I mean, look at the size of that. It's not directly underneath that oil rig, so it's off to the side. It seems unrelated. If you didn't know there was a pipe under there, you wouldn't know it was connected. But it's connected, and if they don't deal with it, what happens? Bad things. The power that comes up can be extremely intense. And the question is then, what do you do? You will start to reach for what? You'll start to do what with that pain? You'll start to try to figure out how to manage this. And all the while, what's happening? Everything except for the one thing that is needed. The one thing that is needed is truth. Truth is trying to come up. But what's not being permitted? Truth is not being permitted, and before you know it, what's happening? Pain. Pain is happening. It's boiling to the surface. People think that you must have issues because, after all, look, kind of a little bit, you have a sharp edge to you. You got some stuff going on here. You know what? Just take some of these. And I'm not minimizing medication, but you know, you just really need to calm down because, after all. And who looks like the problem child? Who looks like the one that has the issue? And in psychological terms, that's called borderline personality disorder. That's often misdiagnosed as Manic depression. Why? Because the person seems so unstable. Well, they are unstable. They're all over the place and they're trying to self-medicate. But what's the only thing missing? Is truth. Truth is being suppressed. And until truth has a way of coming up, that dynamic, that dysfunctional cycle will continue. And we will continue looking at some of the ways this comes up on the other side of the break.
Are you or someone you know a survivor of abuse and wondering where to turn for trustworthy help and insight into the effects of such abuse? Ever wish you had access to a resource that could help you continue your progress in healing? SurvivorSupport.net is that resource. Developed by John Euler, a seasoned therapist with years of experience working with sexual abuse survivors, SurvivorSupport.net is a one-of-a-kind resource to help you understand the impact of abuse and to help you understand the nature of those who harmed you in order to help you gain clarity and continue healing. If you are interested in speaking with John Euler about your situation or in having John conduct a consultation or a training for your church or organization, SurvivorSupport.net serves as a convenient method of contacting him. Our program, Journey to Healing, is made possible through the generous donations of viewers like you. There are many opportunities and needs that Survivor Support is attempting to meet, and your monthly support or one-time gift would be extremely helpful as we seek to meet those needs and opportunities. Simply visit SurvivorSupport.net and you will see the link to donate on the homepage. We thank you.